Let's talk about the AFC West, Logan, where we have, of course, the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. I assume you have them winning the division. What are your thoughts on their outlook this year?
Yeah, it's the Chiefs. I mean, I have them going 13-4. They have Patrick Mahomes. They have Andy Reid. They have Travis Kelsey. They're the new juggernaut of the NFL. Like, I don't know anything new that I can say about the Kansas City Chiefs that hasn't already been said. They have the greatest quarterback talent in NFL history. He's been consistently dominant. I mean, this stretch that we've seen Pat put together is probably the greatest peak out of any quarterback in NFL history. Him and Kelsey create the best QB to receiver tandem, I think, in football. You have one of the greatest football minds ever in Andy Reid on the offensive end. Like, you're just looking at something that is going to be consistently dominant. Maybe you're a little concerned about the offensive line, but you still have dogs up there too, man, like Creed Humphrey. Uh, yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are going to be great. And last year speaks volumes to how the Chiefs can win football games because you have a league average defense, right? You don't have a great defense. We look at these great teams throughout NFL history, and traditionally, they're great on both sides of the ball. They are, top 10 defenses or top 10 offenses. That is traditionally the recipe that you need to go out and win a Super Bowl. Well, the Chiefs dispelled that last season when they're, frankly, an average defense. I think they played better in the playoffs, and I think Spagnuolo was one of the great defensive minds at game planning against individual teams when it comes onto those big stages. But yeah, I have them winning 13 games. I think that might even be low for the Chiefs. I know they have a tough schedule. They play a lot of great teams this year, but I would never pick against Patrick Mahomes. And I need to get all my records straight, Carson, for all of these teams, specifically Buffalo, Baltimore, New York, Kansas City, to really Cincinnati, to determine who's going to be my number one seed. Kansas City's probably going to be my number one seed once more again this season. Although I would consider Jacksonville too. I think they're a sleeper pick for that. Uh, Chiefs are going to be great again. They're probably going to be my number one seed. They're probably going to be my Super Bowl favorite. Yeah, that's what I got, man. I mean, it's the Chiefs. It's the Chiefs.
It's pretty straightforward at this point, dude. I could not pick a Mahomes, Kelsey, Reed led team to do anything less than 12 wins because they never have. Last year was supposed to be the fall off, right? Not to say that people are expecting them to miss the playoffs, but it certainly became trendy to pick the Chargers or the Broncos to win the division and to say, oh, maybe the Chiefs will only win 10 games this year because people thought this will be a pretty average defense and they don't have the sort of game-breaking talent that Tyreek Hill is. It was the weakest group of weapons. But there's just a level of offensive brilliance here that is undeniable. They're going to be a top five offense. They were the number one offense last year. They're just guaranteed to be elite there. And it's like, yeah, Valdez Scantling and Tony and Sky Moore, it's not a great receiving core outside of Travis Kelsey. Not at all. If you just stack those three names up, it would be viewed as one of the weakest in the league, I think. I just doubt that it matters that much. I think that Pat is so capable of elevating everybody around him, combined with a brilliant scheme and the gravity and attention that Travis Kelsey demands over the middle of the field at all times. They're going to dominate. I still think this is a really good line. And then defensively, I think they're going to be good, not great again. I think that this is a defense that improves in the playoffs because of Spagnuolo's brilliance there. But we have seen it, right? Last year, they were an average defense. They still won 14 games. Mahomes' first season as a starter, that was a historically great offense. So you can't apply that standard just scoring 35 points per game every year, but they were 24th in terms of scoring defense that year, and they were still a dominant regular season team. They lose Juan Thornhill. They add Tranquil to the linebacking core. I think it's a pretty similar defense overall. We'll see if George Karlaftis can take a little bit of a leap in year two. It doesn't feel like their most dominant roster, top to bottom, but last year didn't feel like their most dominant roster. They won 14 games in the Super Bowl. So, yeah, it's a tough schedule, right? This is a pretty good division. They get the Eagles and the Bengals and the Bills out of division. You can throw anything at me, man. I'm not picking the Chiefs to win fewer than 12 games. That is where
Yeah.
I have them because it does feel like one of their less talented teams, and maybe there's not peak urgency this entire regular season because they did just win the Super Bowl. There's not an insane talent gap necessarily, but dude, as long as they have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey and Andy Reid, I'm penciling them in to win this division, and I'm pretty much penciling them into the AFC Championship game because guess what? You're hitting 100% of your bets if you've done that so far. So who do you have after them?
Number 2, I'm very excited to see the iteration of this team this year, and it's the Los Angeles Chargers. I have them going 11-6.
Ooh.
I think the big thing about the Chargers last season was just injuries, man. You lose Rashawn Slater, Joey Bosa, J.C. Jackson, Keenan Allen miss a lot of time. Keenan Allen to me feels like Tyler Eifert at this point, dude, or like Jordan Reed in his prime, where it's just like, oh yeah, he's not playing this year. So I don't know if we'll see Keenan. I hope he's back on the field, and I hope the Chargers are healthy because this is shaping up to be a really good team. Last season, we saw Justin Herbert really change stylistically from what he had done early on, and that was he liked pushing the ball downfield. He liked making big plays. Last season, they kind of handcuffed him a little bit. He was 31st with 6.4 air yards per attempt. It's a double-edged sword there, right? It helped him keep his turnover numbers low, but it ultimately limits the big playability of the offense. And when you have a guy with a rocket arm who is such a great improviser out of the pocket, he's so mobile, he's so tall, he's so accurate, I don't want to handcuff him to anything. I want him to drive the ball down for. Maybe a guy like Dak Prescott is a guy you would maybe handcuff to that and say, hey, let's not push the ball down as much, Dak. Let's check it down a little more. But Kellen Moore likes pushing the ball downfield. So this season, I'm expecting to see a really, really great aerial attack that just goes vert with a lot of guys. I mean, Herbert should be able to high point balls to these receivers all game long. You have such a big physical receiving group here. Mike Williams at 6'4", 220. Rookie Quentin Johnson at 6'3", 216. Josh Palmer at 6'1". Keenan Allen at 6'2", 211. If he can stay healthy. And then you've got Gerald Everett, who's 6'3", 250, a tank. Like, Herbert should be able to rifle balls in there and throw high balls all season long, where his receivers should just be able to go up and get them. I think they need to get better in the red zone. They were number 20 last season, but I really do think Kellen Moore should be able to scheme up stuff for an offense that is this talented. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball. This is the number 30 rushing unit last season. I think that limits them a little bit, but again, Herbert has made this offense great in spite of the running game over the past few seasons, and I think that is an overplayed narrative that Herbert is not a great quarterback because he's not a winner. You know, oh, he hasn't had playoff success. Oh, he missed the playoffs a couple of times. Who cares, man? Watch the game. Like, Herbert's super talented. He's made this offense great every year, and he hasn't had great offensive lines. He hasn't had great rushing attacks. He hasn't had great defenses. Situation is super important, and I think Herbert has made the Chargers great in spite of the team around him. Now, can we expect the defense to be great next season? I don't know, Carson. Like, they're cool. I think they're a little bit below average. Like, they were the number 21 scoring defense last season. Eric Kendrick steps in with Kenneth Murray to take over for Drew Tranquill, who you mentioned is going to the Chiefs. I think that's kind of a big loss for Kansas City. Or, excuse me, I think that's kind of a big loss for Los Angeles. I think Drew Tranquill is a good pickup for Kansas City. Kendricks has dealt with injuries over the past few seasons, so I hope he can stay healthy and him and Murray can be great. I'm not banking on it, but I think this offense is going to be so overwhelmingly dominant that this is going to propel them to 11 wins. I also love the addition of Dian Henley over the middle. He was one of my favorite rookies, and I think he was an absolute steal in the third round. So I think you're looking at a average to below average defense, but again, man, I just think the offensive ability here outweighs any issues I have with the defense. I think Herbert is going to get himself back to where he was in that 30 or more touchdown range, over 4,500 passing yards. I think he's going to lead one of the best offenses in football. So that's why I think the Chargers are going to win 11 games. And I don't think this is a great division. I am really down on the Broncos. I am really down on the Raiders. I think the Chargers and the Chiefs beat up on them both throughout the regular season.
That's interesting. The Broncos will be a fun team to talk about. I have the Chargers at 10 wins, and I was actually probably closer to 9 for them. I just don't know that I have faith in this defense getting them to that sort of 11-win mark, and I don't think that this is going to be like the sort of overwhelming offense that we've seen from the Chiefs, for example, where they can overcome meh defense and still be dominant, because I don't think this defense is even going to be meh. I will say I don't like the linebackers here. This was the worst run defense in the league last year and has been almost there for the last 2 years under Brandon Staley. and mediocre against the pass, 30th in yards per play allowed overall. It was a bad defense. And of course, you have Joey Bosa coming back, but it's worth noting he's just an injury-prone guy. It's not uncommon for him to miss a handful of games or close to half a season. So I don't know if it's a guarantee that he'll be out there all year. I will say, I think you're going a bit far comparing Cal Bears legend Keenan Allen to Tyler Eifert, who barely ever
Dude,
played
Keenan
football.
is hurt every year, bro.
Early in his career for like 2 years, but he's been pretty healthy for like the last 6. He missed 7 games last year, but outside of that, I don't think he's like had a significant injury since those early seasons. But yeah, I just don't like this defense here. I do really like the offense though. And like when I look at last year, that team won 10 games with Bosa hurt, with JC Jackson being really disappointing. We'll see if he can reach a higher level again. And with significant injuries to their weapons, with Keenan Allen, with Mike Williams, all these things coming together, they still won 10 games. Now, they didn't have the best point differential. Maybe they, overachieved a little bit there. But I do think that they're going to be a good bit more talented this year because of health, mostly, if they can stay healthy. I'm a huge believer in Herbert, like you. I think he is the 4th best quarterback in football. I think he is an incredible blend of crazy athleticism, extending plays, right, creating advantages with his legs, and then also being able to make any throw, incredible velocity, placement, arm strength, good decision maker. I think he's awesome. I also think the coordinator change is important. I do think he'll be unlocked with a more dynamic, push the ball downfield sort of offensive outlook. And I also do like the addition of Quentin Johnston there through the draft, who maybe isn't the most polished down-to-down receiver who you rely on, but he's big, he's athletic. I like introducing a dynamic guy into the fold like that. I think that the Chargers need more of those like game-changing athletes alongside Herbert. So I agree. I do feel like he has been succeeding really in spite of his situation and still turning out good offenses. All things considered, it's pretty impressive. So I like his weapons now this year. I mean, maybe he doesn't have a great number one, but Williams and Allen and Eckler and Palmer and Johnston, it's going to be a really good offense, I think, even with the run game limitations. But I don't view it in the top tier of offenses, and I just don't see enough improvement on this defense to think, oh, they're going to be above average. They won't be quite as bad as last year, but I do still think it's going to be a weakness, and it's definitely something that prevents me from putting them into that 11-12 win range or viewing them as like a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
I mean, I think if they let Herbert be Herbert, if they let him do his thing, if they let the leash loose a little bit, if Kellen Moore can draw up advantages for LA and they can just be a more dynamic offense, I would. I mean, in any one-game scenario with Justin Herbert at the helm, yeah, I would. Like, don't get me wrong, they're probably on my back end of legitimate contenders, but with Herbert under center, yeah. I mean, I could take them to win any one-off game and win a playoff game or make some noise in that respect. So, yeah, I mean, but it's more of a Herbert thing than anything else.
When you're looking at the elite teams in the AFC, though, right, Patrick Mahomes is unquestionably a better quarterback and is going to have a better defense. Josh Allen, to me, is clearly a better quarterback who is going to have a better defense. Joe Burrow is a better quarterback who is going to have a better defense. Lamar Jackson is an elite quarterback, not quite as good, but is going to have a way better defense. Even like a Deshaun Watson, if you believe in his resurgence, he's going to have a way more talented defense. I just think it can't come down alone to Justin Herbert being great. Like, all of these dudes need good teams. There's an entire other side of the ball that they aren't in control of. There's a reason Drew Brees won 7 games 3 years in a row when he was at his peak. That's just my concern with the Chargers. So I would not put them in that same tier. And it's not about any one game. Maybe they could, but can they win 4 in a row just off of Herbert's greatness when there's other great quarterbacks in the conference and in the league with better rosters? I do not see it yet.
I mean, the Chargers prove they can't even win a game if you spot them 33 points. So, no, the track record isn't great. And no, I'm not putting them in that elite. Don't don't do that. I'm not putting them in that elite like tier
I'm
of
not
teams
doing
in
it.
the AFC.
I'm certainly
I'm
not
saying
doing
like
it.
they're maybe 6 or 7 for me. I don't want to. I'm saying the Chargers
Yeah.
have the potential to win a playoff game. They're not a Super Bowl contender to me. They're a hopeful playoff contender where I think they could maybe upset a team above them. But I like the Chargers. I think they're going to improve this season.
Yeah, I think that they are a playoff team, but I think you're exactly right. They are 6 or 7 in the AFC to me. Okay. Who do you have third in this division?
I have the Denver Broncos going 6-11, and it's primarily because nobody's game tape in the history of the NFL has single-handedly scarred me the way Russell Wilson's did last season. Wow. I hated watching Broncos games. And for a team so talented, I mean, it's just demoralizing watching how much they struggled with Wilson under the helm. Number 32 scoring offense, under 17 points per game. They failed, Carson, to score more than 11 points 6 times last year. I mean, it was an anemic offense that only really saw life towards the end of the season. Not something that you really want out of a brilliant offensive mind in Nathaniel Hackett, but it had a lot to do with Russell Wilson, and that's the big question around the league and surrounding the Denver Broncos this season, right? Is Russell Wilson washed or isn't? I think he's washed. I think Russell Wilson is cooked. I'm not going to let an entire year of game tape. I know that people are going to point, oh, how are you going to let his entire career overshadow what happened last season? Well, Seattle was just a supreme situation to Denver, right? I think they had a better offensive line. I think they had a better coordinator. I think he consistently had better weapons. I like the weapons here, don't get me wrong. I like Judy. I like Cortland Sutton. I like the guys they have here. I just think in Seattle, you had better guys, the DKs of the world, the Tyler Lockett's, the Doug Baldwins. I think they were better.
But, I mean, wouldn't you say that in like the 2020 back to 2017 range, I think Russ is pretty clearly elevating those teams. Those weren't very good lines.
No.
Those weren't very good run games. Of course, he was a totally different player. Like his ability to extend plays, the dynamism of his arm, all that was different. I'm just saying, I don't want to do a full referendum on Russell Wilson here because I think that like 4-year peak was crazy. After the Seahawks had their best defenses in run games, he was still driving them to consistently win 10+ games.
I'm not saying that he wasn't. Russell Wilson was the biggest driver of that. And when he was at his apex, I mean, I had him in top 5 MVP conversations year in, year out. I believe one year I picked him to win MVP over Patrick Mahomes. I don't want to do a revisionist history where I'm saying that the Seahawks made Russell Wilson. I'm not doing that right here. What I am saying is this is a completely different quarterback than what we saw in Seattle. To me, Russell Wilson is not the same guy, and it starts with what you just mentioned. Russell Wilson is not the same improviser or scrambler. He's lost a step mobility-wise, and that is what made, ultimately, Russell Wilson special. That Fran Tarkenton shit where he could just scramble behind the offensive line, get out of the pocket, and just drop it in the bucket 50 yards downfield. He can't do that anymore. But it's not just the big playability that we've seen lost from Russ. It's also the down-to-down consistency and situational and play awareness. Like, Russ isn't hitting wide-open slants last year. He's not hitting wide-open drags. It's like he doesn't know what play is being called. Like, there would be a guy wide open on a slant route. Russ isn't even looking at him, and he throws a ball into double coverage. Russ scarred me last year. Russ looked horrible. And so with that, with the loss of awareness, with the loss of ability, with the loss of improvisational ability, we've just seen Russ's confidence crumble. I've not liked his body language. I have not liked him addressing the media. Russ has looked scarred, legitimately. And I think that this is I don't like predicting a guy's fall off, but I think we are seeing legitimate regression, and I think we're going to continue to see Russ. If Russell Wilson is an average quarterback this season, I think it's a successful year. Like, to me, Russ is a bottom 12 QB in football this upcoming year. I would take 20 guys or more maybe over Russell Wilson. I have little to no faith in Russ this year, and that's where it starts with the Broncos going 6-11 for me. I don't trust Russ to make big plays. I also don't trust Russ to make routine plays. That starts with why I think they're going to win 6 games. I know their offensive line wasn't great last year. but Russell Wilson played like Stevie Wonder. Okay, they add in Mike McGlinchey, they add in Ben Powers. I like Ben Powers. McGlinchey and Powers to me are more beneficiaries and are going to be better at elevating the run game than the pass game. I like Garrett Bowles. I like Quinn Miners. They're going to be an average offensive line. I still think Russ stinks. I mean, they were the number 32 third down offense in football. That lands squarely on the shoulders of Russell Wilson. So that's where I start. Defensively, I think the Broncos could be pretty good. I think they've got one of the best secondaries in the league, anchored by PS2 and Justin Simmons. They add Kareem Jackson in there. I just really wonder if they're going to be able to pressure the QB. I think they're going to be a really solid rushing defense. I think they're going to be a good situational defense. And I think they've got a great secondary, but I question if they're going to be able to put pressure on the quarterback, which I think is the most valuable thing when it comes to evaluating defenses. They trade away Bradley Chubb. They're 25th in pressure rate last season, and their best pressurers are Frank Clark and Randy Gregory. So to me, you add up all the recipe here, slightly above average defense with what I think is a washed QB with an average line and good weapons. I don't think it's a good football team. And again, the majority reason of why I'm saying this is I have lost all of my faith in Russell Wilson as a quarterback. So I have them winning 6 games. Maybe I'm being too harsh on Russ. What do you think, Carson? Do you think Russ is washed? Do you have faith that Sean Payton is going to be able to reinvigorate and make him a great quarterback again? What's your outlook for the Broncos this season?
So I think that the reality is somewhere in the middle. I think that last year was a worst case scenario in almost every way for the Broncos. They hired the worst head coach in football. Their line was very bad. They had injuries. They traded away one of their highest impact guys, Bradley Chubb, in the middle of the season and didn't have a way to supplement that value. They were terrible situationally, which I think coaching certainly plays a factor in. All those things come together, and they were a 5-win team. So to me, a 1-win improvement when I do feel like this team is pretty clearly better would be surprising. At the same time, no, I do not view them as a playoff team. I think that they are definitely a 7 or 8-win team. I have them at 8 right now, and it's mostly because I think this defense is better than what some of like the raw numbers in terms of their scoring defense last year would suggest, because they were doing so little offensively. They were dealing with shorter fields. They were having to stay out on the field for extended periods of time. But in terms of yards per play, they were 3rd. I agree with you. I don't think it's a very good pass rush. At the same time, the 2 best pass rushers who you mentioned did not play here last year in Randy Gregory and Frank Clark. So I think there will be some improvement there. But really the staple is this was a top 5 run defense last year, and it was still a borderline top 10 pass defense, not because of the pass rush, but because it is one of the league's elite secondaries. And if you got Justin Simmons and Pat Surtain back there, that is scary. I also think it's a good linebacker core. So I think it's a really good defense. I think it's a top 10 defense. And then offensively, it's like, to be competitive, to win 8 games, they really just have to do enough. It's like you said, they have to, right, just not avoid the disasters of last year where they have all those games under 17 points where there's conversations about if Russ is going to throw more touchdowns than he has bathrooms in his room, in his house. And I definitely think that Russ has taken a big step back. I thought there were some major points of concern. I did not like his pocket awareness. I think that he was sacked the most times in football for a few reasons. It was a bad line. But also he has always had a tendency to try to extend plays at times too much and not having a great awareness of when he's putting himself in danger. And with a bit of regression in athleticism too, I think he was punished even more for that. The athletic decline was real last year. He was not the same creator outside of the pocket. I didn't like his decision making, like you said. I thought it was very strange for a quarterback who's been so good for so long, some of the decisions he made with the ball. And I thought his accuracy at times was terrible. Some of his interceptions last year were just horrible. So there's no question. I don't think Russ is a good starting quarterback. I don't think there's a world in which he makes a top 10 bounce back, especially because, the weapons here are solid, right? Sutton and Judy, of course, and Dulcich, but they haven't really changed meaningfully from last year. They're not elite. It's not the sort of thing where it's like you expect that to actively elevate him. It's not, for example, giving Aaron Rodgers Garrett Wilson, right? But I do think the line is going to be a lot better. Even if you think it's average, I think it could be above average. But going from probably one of the worst in the league really matters. Again, you're going from a really bad coach in Nathaniel Hackett, not necessarily just a bad offensive mind outright, but I don't think a guy who understood how to maximize Russ's value and who was just really bad in terms of game management, personality management, all these things. You now go to a very proven head coach and offensive mind in Sean Payton. And I do think, not overreacting to preseason, but he looks more mobile and athletic to me. I think he is in better physical condition, and he had a couple of really good runs against the Niners. So if you bring back a little bit of that pop with a year of chemistry built up with the weapons here, with a better offensive mind, with a better offensive line, if Russ can just be mediocre instead of flat out bad, I think that's enough to get this team to push 500. To me, the only way they reach a high ceiling is if there is a legitimate Russ resurgence, because I don't think that this is going to be like a great rushing attack. We'll see how Javonte Williams really looks coming off of a major injury. I'm not high on the Broncos, but I also don't know that I'm low on them, because I think it's tough to deny basically everything went wrong last year. And if they had just capable offensive production, that would have been a respectable team. That's all I'm expecting this year.
You make a really good point. If Russ is average and can just manage, I can definitely see a world where they get to 8 or 9 games. And for the record, oh my gosh, I love Javonte Williams, dude. That guy is gnarly. Like, I hope that McGlinchey and Powers can open up running lanes for him, because he's one of my favorite backs to watch in the league, dude. That guy can shake anybody. I'm just not banking on Russ being better. He has looked good in the preseason. I hope that he looks better this season, but I'm physically, emotionally, and mentally scarred from the Broncos offense I watched last season under the helm of Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett.
I get it, but it just feels to me like there's so many of those games where they can just get one more score on the board, and they were in it against good teams. They're not going to be the worst scoring offense in football to me. I just think there's too many things trending in the right direction. But last and least, Logan, the Raiders. What's your take on them for this year?
The Raiders. Look, speaking of disaster classes, that's, ultimately what describes the Raiders' 2022 campaign. These stats are courtesy of Yahoo Sports. Carson, they were the first team to blow 5 halftime leads of 7 or more points. They were the first team since 1930 to blow 4 double-digit halftime leads, and 3 of those losses were by 17 or more points. Hear me out. The Steelers will lose week 2 or 3 whenever we play Las Vegas. We cannot play the Raiders. I might put my house on that if I had one. We will end up losing to the Raiders. And I love, friend of the show, I love you, Mikey. I love the Raiders too. It feels like we're headed towards another disastrous season for Vegas, man. To me, with Josh McDaniels just comes dysfunction and losing. He's just got a clear track record of it, man. In his career, he is a 17-28 head coach. And there's just a lot of red flags with that, man. With the disaster that was last season, with McDaniels' track record, with Jimmy G maybe not being able physically to perform. Is Josh Jacobs going to play? Is Devontae Adams happy? It just seems like dysfunction, disaster, and a crash and burning of a season is a lot more likely to me than the Raiders making an actual playoff push. Like, statistically, they weren't horrible, and they've got a lot of talent, right? Like, if Josh Jacobs can somehow lead the league in rushing again and plays every week, yeah, maybe this offense could be great. If Jimmy G and Devontae Adams hook up and are a great talented duo, hell yeah, like they could be an average passing attack. But that's the apex of the offense. And like I said, there's a lot of red flags. Jimmy G's injuries, Jacobs' disgruntlement with the franchise, Devontae Adams not being happy with how he was utilized last season. So there's a lot of red flags with a talented offense. And then when you look defensively, Carson, these numbers absolutely blew my mind. How long do you think it's been since the Raiders have had a top 20 scoring defense?
Oh, I know, because I have cited this before. I actually think, was it 2006, which is crazy because that's the year that they were like 2-14 and then they got Jamarcus, but I think that's it.
It's 2006. The Raiders have not had a top 20 defense in 17 seasons, man. Their last good defense was '06. Their last great defense was 2002 when they went to the Super Bowl. They're horrible. 29 passing defense, 26 scoring defense. The Raiders had a whopping 13 takeaways last year with dead last, and they allowed an opposing passer rating of nearly 100 last season. That ranked 32. I think the one area where we see the Raiders succeed this season is with their front four. I love Max Crosby. I love the acquisition of Tyree Wilson. I think they're going to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. I think they're going to be able to plug up holes in the middle. They got Jerry Tillery, Theo Ash's favorite player in NFL history. And they get Marcus Epps for the back end. Really good safety from Philly, but I don't think he's going to transcend this passing defense into being great. So, yeah, there's talent on the offense, but this team has a track record of being horrible defensively. I think they're going to be one of the worst defenses in the NFL again this season. And I don't think Josh McDaniels is a good head coach. I don't get how McDaniels didn't get fired last season, Carson. Look, there's a clear distinction of guys who are great offensive minds or great defensive minds and should not be head coaches. Josh McDaniels, to me, is the epitome of that. Nathaniel Hackett, great OC, not a head coach. Josh McDaniels, great OC, not a head coach. Todd Bowles, great defensive coordinator, not a head coach. Bill O'Brien, great offensive coordinator, not a head coach, and certainly not a general manager, right? There's just guys that just fill that box. They are great at one end of the football. They can scheme up anything. Matt Patricia, decent coordinator, not a head coach. To me, there's just guys that aren't meant to be head coaches. And to me, Josh McDaniels is one of them. I don't know what he's building here. I certainly don't believe in it. I think the Raiders are dead last in this division. I think they go 5-12, and I think at the end of this season, Josh McDaniels gets fired.
Yeah. Wow, with all that, I thought that you were going to go even lower on the Raiders, man, because
I thought about it. I certainly thought about it.
That's the thing, dude. It's just like you look everywhere in the league, and there's talent everywhere. Somebody's got to suck. I think the Raiders are the worst team in the AFC, probably. It is interesting. The last couple years, we haven't seen a 2-win team or worse. I don't know exactly what to make of that, but I feel like a big component there is just like the more widespread, competent quarterback play, sort of what we were talking about with Mac Jones. And I do feel like that will keep the Raiders afloat at least a little bit. I only have them winning 4 games. I don't want to come out here and sound overly optimistic. And shout out Mikey. I live with Mikey. He came out of his room the other day and asked me when we were going to preview the Raiders and how I thought they were going to do. And I just threw up a 3 at him, and he didn't like that. I've bumped them up from 3 wins to 4, but I will say the one bright spot for the Raiders, and the reason that I've given them that extra win, is that I think we have every reason to expect that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to miss time, right? I mean, he played in this past preseason game, but he's already been hurt in the offseason. He has 2 seasons as a starter where he's actually stayed healthy. So it seems to me more likely than not that he is going to miss significant time. And that could be disastrous. But I actually like Aiden O'Connell, who they drafted out of Purdue this year. I think he's looked really good in preseason. I really like his pocket presence. He hangs in there, but he doesn't push it too far. He's very poised. He's accurate. He gets the ball out quickly. I think that's a dude who can be a sort of like back-end starter, really good backup in the league. He just has the level of pure pocket passing, right? He's not going to do the above and beyond stuff with the arm strength, with the creation outside the pocket, but he's solid. And he's solid enough to where I think it's a pretty damn good insurance policy if Jimmy G gets hurt. But as a rookie quarterback, is he going to be better than like Derek Carr last year? No. Is Jimmy G better than Derek Carr? No. I understand that everybody seems to hate Carr. I do think that he has regressed. I also think he's been in a lot of bad situations, and it's going to be fun to see him in New Orleans. But Jimmy G just isn't good, man. Like, he has been in such privileged situations, but his accuracy is average. His pocket presence is honestly not that good. He can get panicked back there. His arm talent isn't good. He's not actually super turnover averse. He makes mistakes.
But, like, look at him. Look at him, Carson. He looks like a quarterback,
He's incredibly handsome. He's incredibly handsome. And if he were to take my hypothetical daughter out for lunch, I'd be thrilled. And I'd give him everything that I have. But He's not a good NFL starting quarterback. He's not even close. Like last year, think about it, dude. Brock Purdy, man, he was Mr. Irrelevant. Now I think Brock Purdy is good, but it certainly tells you something when the rookie Mr. Irrelevant comes in and that offense is averaging 5 more points per game with him. And it's like, yeah, this guy's clearly better than Jimmy Garoppolo, the $200 million man. So I could see a point. The Raiders are going to suck this year where it's just like, hey, let's see what Aiden O'Connell has as a starter. It doesn't have to be at the start of the year, but I think that is something that they can look forward to at least a bit. A 4th-round rookie quarterback who I like more than average. Because outside of that, man, it's not good. It's quite bad. I think the weapons have regressed a bit here, losing Mac Hollins and Darren Waller, although Waller has been hurt a lot. They bring in Jacoby Myers and Austin Hooper. They still have Devontae, thank God. But I think the line is below average. I think they're going to rely heavily on the run game here, right? Josh Jacobs is not their best offensive player because of Devontae, but he might be their most productive just because Jimmy G is limited. And also I think driving the play action is pretty important to making Jimmy G even capable. He's been such a beneficiary of that in San Francisco. But how is Josh Jacobs going to be better than last year, man? Right? He played every game. He was incredible. Obviously, we've had the whole situation this offseason. So I don't know. I don't see how this offense is as good as last year. The quarterback is worse. I think the weapons are a little bit worse, and I can't see Jacobs in the run game being better. And the defense is going to be really bad, man. You mentioned it. They sucked against the pass. They were 28th in yards per attempt allowed. They were bottom 10 in pressure rate, and I think Chandler Jones was a real disappointment given his regression. They sucked against the run, 23 in yards per attempt allowed. So I see a team that was 6-11, and like, yeah, they blew some games and they were solid offensively, but not by any stretch of the imagination a good or even average football team whose division has gotten stronger as they've gotten worse, and they aren't good at anything except running the ball, where I don't think they can be as good as last year when they were still a 6-win team. So I think 4 wins, 3 wins, maybe 5 is the range they have to be in. Sorry, Mikey, the Raiders are not good, and I don't see any path to them being good.
100%. Sorry, McDaniels. I think this is his last rope. I think this is his last shot, man.
Yeah.
And I think Jimmy G can do one thing better than Derek Carr last season, and that's not make monumental screw-ups in like the game's biggest moments.
Really, though?
That's the
because I think
edge.
Jimmy G does that too.
He does. I just mean like marginally. Like Carr was really bad last year in big moments, specifically that Steelers game. Carr threw 2. Like the Raiders had that game sealed, man, like an envelope. That game was over. And then Carr ends up throwing 2 interceptions down the stretch. That's the only area where I can see Jimmy G being even slightly better than Carr, and that's in Maverick-esque plays where you're trying to do something, where you're trying to go out and make a big play. And even that, bro, like you said, it's minimal because Jimmy G is due for a couple of those a season too. I don't love the Raiders. I wish I could. I wish I could sell you on them, Mikey. I'm sorry, man. The Raiders are just not going to be good this year.
Yeah, I do think this was the best year for Jimmy G in terms of limiting turnovers this past season, and it was probably the worst for Carr. And still, Carr's interception percentage was 2.8. That's by far the highest of his career. Jimmy G's has been 2.7 or higher every year as a starter except for this past season, and up at like 3.4, 3.6 in a couple of his abbreviated seasons. He's not good. He turns the ball over. He's just incredibly handsome. And he managed to get America to buy in. And honestly, I respect the hell out of it. He attached himself to 2 of the all-time great franchises. He came in, won 2 games when Tom Brady was out. And then he always just gets hurt. And so people can't remember. And he comes back and they think, well, that Jimmy G guy, he's been to a Super Bowl. He almost won a Super Bowl. But he's the reason they lost a Super Bowl, isn't he, Logan? Because he couldn't make a throw to a wide-open Emmanuel Sanders. His bum ass. All right. That's going to do it for us here today. Jimmy G is also not just a winner, dude. I hate when people say that. If you give a lot of quarterbacks the best skill position, talent, and defense in the NFL, they can win games. Jimmy G's got more picks than touchdowns in the playoffs. He's just not a good quarterback. And unfortunately, the Raiders are going to be exposed to that reality pretty soon. So, if you guys enjoyed this, the good news is there's always more Nerd Sesh content. You can follow us across social, TikTok at Nerd Sesh, Instagram, same handle, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can listen to the show across audio platforms, and you can find our full shows with video on YouTube. We are going to be continuing our NFL previews next week. Of course, we also do trivia stuff and NBA. You can catch all of that. You can get our merch at thevolume.com. I am wearing the Nerd Sesh hat. We have the flags behind us. We've got shirts. We've got hoodies. Check all of that out. You can also find it through our link tree in any of our social media bios, where we also have our Discord linked. So you can check that out if you just want to talk football, basketball with us. You can also check us out on Cameo if you have any requests through our link tree. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I have been Carson Breber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.